everybody. My name is Nanika Edwards. I am a poet, artist, and author from Trinidad and Tobago in the Southern Caribbean. I don't have much time, so let me see how quickly I can do this. I am here to talk about depression, and to see what I think are some, what may be one of the big causes of depression and how to deal with it. I am not a trained counselor, so just know that I'm not offering this as, absolutely professional advice. I'm just offering my layman's perspective of things, having studied the Word of God for a long time, having walked with God for a long time, and seeing that biblical principles, once they're correctly applied, can have a major constructive impact on how we manage our personal well-being, including mental well-being. Let me see here. So I think that one of the biggest causes of depression is social isolation, right? We saw that during the pandemic when so many of us were forced to, be at home without being able to interact with other people like we normally would, or being forced to stay at home with somebody who feels like a stranger and still feeling isolated, right? Even though we have company, but once you can't connect with people, you will feel isolated. So biblical examples of this, I think of Joseph, when he was in prison, maybe even when he was not yet in Egypt, when he was among his brothers who couldn't stand him, he probably felt pretty isolated. But when he ended up in Egypt as a slave, so as a slave, you are confined to a certain space. And I could imagine that must have been kind of depressing. And then he was in prison and couldn't find his way out on his own. That must have been depressing, okay? And then you've got Naomi. So now we have a woman, goes to a foreign land. Her husband, her sons pass away. She ends up being very bitter. And eventually things work out and so on. But there was a period of her life when she was very bitter. And if all you are is bitter, I promise you're going to be depressed, okay? Bitterness does not make you feel sweet, like as sweet as sunshine. So if you're feeling bitter, like the way Naomi was, and she said that she was a bitter woman, you're going to be depressed, right? And just think about it. You're in this foreign land. The people you're familiar with, the people who are connected to the culture you're familiar with, they pass away. Your son, your husband, your sons, your husband, and you're in a strange land with culture, among a culture whose practices you don't like, you don't agree with, you will feel probably socially isolated and lonely, okay? And then you had Job, Job, when he lost everything, and sometimes people only hang out with you and spend time with you because they feel they can get something for you. I'm sure that was the case with Job sometimes. I'm sure there were a lot of people who simply hung out with Job and associated with Job because he was wealthy. He was the richest man in the East, so he had to have been really wealthy. When he lost everything, I'm sure that must have been, that part would have been, that's something that would have made him feel really depressed. He was so depressed that he said he wanted to die. That's how depressed he was. And that is one of the symptoms of depression, what they call suicidal ideation. I think that's what it's called, when we feel so down that we actually think that, I'd much prefer not to be here. That can be a part of depression. So let me tell you how I deal with things like that. Walking with God is the main way that I deal with that. For example, I'm in a season of my life where it's very solitary, but I don't feel lonely. I'm alone, solitary, but not lonely, because I spend quality time with God. Looking at the time here, I spend quality time with God every day. Even if I cannot read my Bible every day, I still make sure that I spend time connecting with God, soul to soul, every day. Usually in the wee hours of the morning is when I spend time with the Lord. But really, I talk to him all day, and God talks back. So I don't feel lonely, to be honest. Apart from which, when at the church, one of the churches that I used to go to, I eventually left, but anyway, long story short, there came a point where I felt really lonely. People generally, I think, respected me, liked me. A lot of people, not everybody, but A lot of people did, and I technically had a lot of friends, but I felt very lonely because people didn't call. If I reached out to people, they didn't call back. People were consumed maybe with their families or other friends who maybe they thought were more important, that kind of thing. So I ended up being very, very lonely. So much so that it kind of gnawed at my soul. That's how horrible it felt. That's what loneliness feels like. It's like something that gnaws at your soul. Your soul is already dry, and it's almost like something gnawing at your soul. That's what it feels like. So I was very lonely, but soon after I left that community, that church, I remember I was lying on one of the beds at home here, and I told God how I felt. And then he told me something very comforting, and immediately that hole in my soul closed up. That hole in my soul that I felt like it just couldn't be filled, it closed up. And I've never ever felt lonely ever since. And by the way, back then I also had a really good relationship with the Lord, but for some reason I just couldn't shake that horrible lonely feeling. Maybe it allows me to empathize with people who do feel that way. Maybe God allowed me to feel it. I don't know. But now that feeling is completely gone because I can have intelligent conversations with God. He talks back, maybe not in a flow of conversation, but in bits and pieces of thoughts where I can kind of, I don't know how to explain it to you. You have to get to know God to understand how this works and experience the beauty of it. But that's how I deal with loneliness. So I'm not depressed, even though I don't have a rich social life or anything like that. In a way, I do, because I much prefer to have no human friends and have God as a friend than to have tons of friends, human friends, people friends, and not know God. I think that would be the worst position to be in. So I'm very contented. I love God. He's very kind to me. He's a wonderful person to know. Best person in my life. I always say he's my bestie. I love spending time with him. It's a lot of fun. I know there are people who feel that spending time with God is boring. Those are people who do not know God and maybe have not taken enough time to really get close to him. If that's you, I would encourage you, take the time to get to know God. Pay the price that you have to pay to get to know God. Put aside time where it's just you and God. Be transparent. Don't hide anything from him. If you're not transparent with God, your friendship with God will go nowhere. So be transparent, have fun, be yourself. That's the way to build a friendship with God. So that to me is the best antidote to loneliness, apart from just, there are other things you could do, like, go volunteer at an organization, volunteer at a pet shelter, adopt a pet, spend time doing something where you will be around other people. You can do that as well. Feel free to share thoughts and comment questions in the comment section. That's it for now. I hope that this series was useful for you. And that's it. I gotta end this because I'm about to run out of I'm about to run out of free power. So do have a lovely week. And if you are dealing with depression, just know that there is hope. God is hope. Jesus is hope. There's nothing he cannot solve. There's no problem he cannot solve. And he's the most wonderful companion. So just know there is hope, and there is an answer to the things that are making you wonder, how do I deal with this? All righty, that's it for now. Until next time.